Please tell me you got that.
Despite Britain's many strengths, we are not realising our full potential, failing to harness the talent of every region and nation. That is why the policies we're setting out today are among the most important in all of our programme to transform Britain, in our manifesto, for the many, not the few. Because today is not just about giving people a fairer share of our country's wealth. Today is about tackling the injustices of our society at their root cause and rewriting the rules of our economy for the many rather than the few. No more can Britain try to sustain its economy on the back of growth of the financial sector in one corner of England. Today, we set out a bold vision for a different Britain, a Britain in which work not only pays, but gives people a sense of pride and purpose, in which every individual shares in the creation of wealth, as well as sharing in its rewards. A Britain in which every community, in every corner of the country, is built on the firm foundation of a vibrant local economy. Only Labour will deliver policies that match the scale of our ambition, investing to create 1 million good jobs, investing in the skills of our workforce and working with industry to create the winners of the future. And now, it's my absolute pleasure to hand the rostrum over to our Shadow Business Secretary, Rebecca Long-Bailey, who will tell you more of the details of our policy. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you, Jeremy and Chi, for those very kind introductions. And I'd like to thank the staff here today for welcoming us here to this fantastic space in York Science Park. Now, I'm sure many of you know that York has a proud industrial past. In the 19th century, many of the sweets and chocolate brands we all know and love, like Terry's and Rowntree's, started production here in York. And by the end of the century, confectionery production was a major employer here, second only to the railways. Now, confectionery production maintains a presence here in York, but like many industrial communities across the north of England, the industry has faced significant challenges. Only a few weeks ago, Nestlé announced job cuts across a number of factories, including York, and the move of blue-ribboned production to Poland. Now, the decline of these industries, and indeed other key manufacturing hubs across the country, has largely been due to the economic choices made by successive governments. They didn't just leave a gap in the jobs market and a gaping hole in our economy. Their exit from places up and down Britain quite simply ripped the heart and soul out of communities, leaving many areas struggling to bounce back. Those communities felt left behind, their pride, hopes and dreams shattered. But in the last few weeks, Labour has used this election campaign as an opportunity to lay out a bold vision of a different Britain. A Britain that will rebuild those communities. A Britain that looks after its sick and elderly. A Britain that gives every child the chance to reach their full potential, and in which going to university doesn't leave you saddled with tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt. A Britain in which everyone who works earns enough to live on, and everyone who doesn't work has the chance of finding a decent, fulfilling job. It's a Britain that is quite simply fairer, richer and happier. Now today, I'm here to talk about how we build that Britain, because we can't do it with an economy that relies on debt-driven consumption to drive growth, with families using credit cards simply to get by each week. We can't do it with an economy that's so imbalanced that people in London earn £134 more a week than people here in Yorkshire, and in which the top 1% own 24% of the wealth. Now, Labour's manifesto is a promise to rewrite the rules in favour of the majority of people, and today I will set out how we will do that for our economy. For years, Britain's economy has been rigged in favour of a narrow but powerful interest in the financial sector in one corner of England. Now, we were led to believe that released from the shackles of regulation, the growth of the City of London could sustain the whole economy, that we shouldn't worry about our once proud industrial communities being sent into managed decline because we had the welfare state to redistribute to areas that were left out of London's growth. That we shouldn't worry that swathes of the country were seeing their potential wasted, or that the activities of the financial sector grew more and more detached from people's needs because all that mattered was headline growth. Now, the 2007 financial crisis showed us the dangers of an economy overly reliant on an unfettered and highly volatile financial sector. But Britain's yet to learn that lesson. Headline growth may have recovered since the crisis, but the structural weaknesses of Britain's economy remain. Our economy continues to be grossly imbalanced sectorally towards the service sector and geographically towards the London and the South East. Productivity and investment are stagnant. Our balance of payment deficit shows no sign of shrinking, and average earnings are not expected to return to 2008 levels before 2021. Now, it's completely unacceptable, in my view, that 10 years on from the financial crisis, people who played no part in creating it are still paying the price today. And the country's decision to leave the EU last summer has raised the stakes even higher. When Britain leaves the EU, developing a new economic model, a new role for Britain in the world will not just be desirable, but it will be essential. Now, the Conservatives have set out their stall, choosing bombastic rhetoric over serious strategies for negotiations. They've picked winners, offering bespoke deals whilst leaving most businesses out in the cold. They insist that no deal is better than a bad deal. But the businesses I speak to all across the country know that this is complete nonsense. Now, if we crash out of the EU without a deal, it will destroy what remains of our industrial base and fire the starting gun in a race to the bottom on wages and workers' rights, quite frankly. Now, Labour's vision couldn't be more different. We've said repeatedly that we will put our economy first in Brexit negotiations, but we'll go further than that. We'll break with the failed economic policies of the past, define a new relationship between government and the economy, and rebuild our economy on a better model. Unlike the Conservatives, Labour won't shy away from making full use of all available policy levers. We'll work in partnership with business and trade unions to rebalance our economy so that it serves the many, not the few. Our National Transformation Fund and £250 billion of lending by our new National Investment Bank and network of regional development banks will transform our economy and deliver 1 million good jobs over the course of the next Parliament. Now, Labour's plan is centred around three key pillars. Firstly, national missions to address the biggest societal issues of our time. Secondly, a set of cross-cutting policies to create a fertile ground for business growth. And thirdly, collaboration and support at a sectoral level. Following the work of leading economist Mariana Mazzucato, Labour will set national missions to tackle the defining problems of our age. To meet these missions, the public sector will make strategic investments that catalyse private sector innovation. Now, our first mission, and you've already heard this from Jeremy earlier, was to ensure that 60% of the UK's energy will come from low carbon or renewable sources by 2030. Climate change, as we know over recent days with Donald Trump's announcement, is quite simply the biggest challenge confronting humanity. And our ambitious target will spur the kind of bold and decisive action that has so far been lacking. But not only that, it will also help our economy and put us at the forefront of an emerging global renewable technology market. For climate change is a threat, but it's also an economic opportunity. Transforming our energy system and investing in renewable technologies will create good jobs, boost our exports and lower the price of energy for everyone. Now, Britain is also home to the greatest innovative minds of our time. We've led the world in science and technology, and as a child I marvelled at the technological advancements that my region in Greater Manchester had contributed to Britain. When my dad took me to the Museum of Science and Industry in Manchester, we invented the computer there. We discovered graphene, just to name but a few. And I was proud of my industrial heritage growing up. But you know what? I don't want our pride to be consigned to mere school trips to museums. I want us to rewrite history, where Britain leads the world going forward in science and innovation, where we are the leaders of the next industrial revolution, where our sense of pride comes not only from the greatness of the British people and our history, but also the services and products we manufacture and deliver in the future. I call it industrial patriotism. So our second mission is to put Britain at the forefront of world innovation and to ensure that the products and services we create are manufactured and delivered here in Britain. We'll create an innovation nation with the greatest proportion of high-skilled jobs in the OECD and 3% of our GDP spent on research and development by 2030. Innovation is essential to improving our productivity, which is the best means of raising wages and boosting the competitiveness of British industry. The UK has world-leading technological industries and research institutions, but we're lagging behind in terms of investment in R&D, spending only 1.7% of GDP compared to the OECD average of 2.4%. We simply aren't competing. The next Labour government will immediately invest 1.3 billion in the first 2 years of government, a proven way to galvanise the private sector into investing much more. We'll establish 2 new catapult centres, one for retail and one for metals, reflecting the breadth and diversity of the UK economy. Now, in setting these missions, we are laying down the gauntlet to business. Central government will do its part by providing the foundations on which they can be met. We'll invest in people and ensure that businesses can access the highly skilled workforce they want by setting up our National Education Service, allowing everyone to upskill and retrain at any point in their life. We'll harness the 200 billion the government spends in the private sector each year to promote responsible businesses. We will direct public money back into local economies so that local pounds create local jobs. We'll take action to reverse the offshoring seen in recent decades by bringing supply chains and good jobs back to the UK. But we'll do so by highlighting and extending Britain's strengths, because we know we can't run a race to the bottom on wages and conditions. Labour will also take action on excessive energy prices, which put our industries at a disadvantage. We'll reverse years of underinvestment in our infrastructure, investing 250 billion over the next 10 years through our National Transformation Fund. We'll introduce a universal service obligation for super-fast broadband at 3 times the speed promised by the Tories, future-proofing the UK economy. We'll transform our transport systems all across regions and all across our nations. Here in Yorkshire, we'll deliver Crossrail for the north to connect our wonderful northern cities. But it's not just in terms of public sector investment that Britain has been falling behind. Businesses need help to invest more too. And that's why Labour will set up a national investment bank to fill gaps in lending to the private sector and provide the patient, long-term finance businesses need to grow and prosper. Now, finally, our industrial strategy will have a strong sectoral element. As the work of economist Ha-Joon Chang has shown, the strongest industrial economies in the world, Germany, South Korea, Japan, got to where they are today because their governments nurtured and supported key sectors as they grew. A Labour government will do the same. We'll break with the failed ideology of the past and learn from the world's best by supporting sectors in which Britain is already a world leader and cultivating new strengths. We'll set up sector councils for each strategic sector, modelled on the highly successful Automotive Council, to bring together government, employers, workers and their trade unions as part of a new era of economic cooperation. Through collaborative effort between government and industry, Labour will create the winners of the future. We'll make sure that Britain is viewed by the world as a symbol of innovative and industrial excellence. We'll produce 1 million high-quality, high-skilled, high-paid jobs. We will deliver economic growth to every region and every nation. And quite simply, Labour will build an economy that works for the many. not the few. Thank you very much.
Hi. Well, now we're going to take a few questions, and I have the honour of chairing the question and answer session. So we'll take sort of in rounds of 3. Can I have an idea of who'd like to ask? Who'd like to ask a question? Okay. Well, let's go towards the row at the back. Actually, there's 3 hands up at the back. So we'll start with the lady there.
Jeremy, you were saying about Donald Trump pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement and criticising Theresa May for not signing the statement, and that Labour would do things differently in that relationship. Would you be happy to host Donald Trump in Downing Street, and how would you do the relationship differently, and what's the first issue on which you tackle him? What would you say to him?
Okay, shall we pass it right? Great.
Morning, Rachel Younger from ITV News. Another question for Jeremy. Jeremy, you said repeatedly you don't do personal insults, you don't do personal comments. Will you make an exception this morning for Donald Trump?
And Mr. Corbyn, you present yourself as a pretty straight sort of guy in the same way that Tony Blair did, yet you still lack trust in your economic competence and honesty in some ways. Is turning that round in the week that remains before polling day an impossible mission? And just to follow what's been said, what could you do as a British Prime Minister to materially change what President Trump has done?
Okay, so that's 3 questions which are mainly about President Trump rather than our industrial strategy. But let's Jeremy, shall we start with you?
Listen, the decision that President... excuse me, sorry, it's... the clean water of Yorkshire is needed. The decision of President Trump to withdraw from the Paris Climate Change Agreement is absolutely shocking. Just think about what is happening to our planet. Think about the work that was done by many, many people over the past 40 or 50 years to get to a position where there is a global agreement that we understand we cannot go on pumping CO2 into the atmosphere and polluting our seas and rivers and our air without massive human consequences. And the Paris conference was a culmination of a number of other events, going right back to Montreal, to Kyoto, to Copenhagen. And I was talking this morning to Ed Miliband about the work he did in bringing about agreements when he was a minister in the last Labour government. And so President Trump's decision to get off the bus when every other major industrial country in the world had agreed, albeit in some cases quite reluctantly, to go along with Paris is, I think, a very, very big shame indeed. And I suspect the reaction in the United States will not be as he expects, because an awful lot of people in the United States are also very concerned about climate change, because they too suffer drought, they too suffer flooding, they too suffer unpredictability of weather patterns and weather systems. And so I appeal to the American people, think about the consequence to the entire planet of your economy, one of the biggest in the world, probably the biggest economy in the world, and what you're doing. Would I meet and host Donald Trump in Downing Street? Yes. Would I talk to him? Yes. Would I be polite? Absolutely. Yeah. I would even offer him some Yorkshire tea. And I just do not believe you get anywhere by insulting people and shouting at them. I would try and persuade him as best I could to understand the reality that there is no hiding place from environmental disaster and climate change. You can't buy your way out of a flood or out of polluted air. It affects us all. So I would say that to him. And John, thank you for your very kind question, as ever. Our economic strategies are fully costed, are fully prepared, are fully presented, and unlike every other party, we've put them out there for discussion and debate. Some might say, well, that's a high-risk strategy. No, I think people should know what we're proposing to do, should know the tax rises we're proposing for corporations and the very wealthiest, and should know the benefits of it. Chi and Becky have set out a very good strategy for our industry this morning. That requires investment, but it requires investment in people as well. So take the whole thing together. We invest in preschool, we invest in primary schools, we invest in secondary. We don't burden future generations of students with massive debt. We glory in their achievements at university, at wonderful universities like York, and the contribution they make, obviously to enrich their own lives, but to enrich all of our lives as well. And so I think our economic strategy is innovative, carefully thought out, and something that is very exciting. We cannot go on being an economy that's overheated on the financial services sector in the southeast, leaving whole swathes of former mining and former heavy industrial areas underemployed, low wage, insecure jobs, and precious little investment. So we start with strategic investment in rail, in broadband. We improve rail links across the north. We improve feeder rail links such as Hull to the East Coast Main Line, and there are many others around the country to improve that. And so that way we begin to get a bit better economic balance. And when Rachel and Chi are talking about in industrial strategy, we bring all factors of industry together. So we have a council for each of the main industries in which all those innovative ideas come together, and government is at the table investing in new technology, in new ideas, and in research. Why is it that Germany has so much greater proportion of its gross national income from manufacturing industry than us? Why do they have such highly productive industries compared to us? The answer is they've had basically a cross-party agreed strategy for the past 50 years that everyone will invest in industry to make sure everybody benefits. In this country, we're still paying the price of the Thatcherite deregulation of the economy and deindustrialization of our society. And I'll conclude on this point because we started with the environmental question. I believe passionately that we have to do everything possible to support and defend our ecosystems and our natural world. I'm absolutely passionate about that. You don't do it by walking away. You do it by using all the brilliance of technology to carefully manage and monitor the natural resources we use, prevent pollution, and promote a sustainable environment. And our strategy can only be achieved if you have a government that seriously understands that and seriously involved. And I tell you what, this manifesto is not just the product of the Labour Party and trade unions and shadow cabinet and national executive. It's hundreds and hundreds of different voluntary sector organisations that have shared their knowledge and expertise with us. This is a product of a lot of very creative, very clever, creative thinking. And that's something that can deliver for this country. Thank you very much.
Let's have a look at economic competence, shall we? The current government has brought us into £700 billion worth of debt, which is more than any Labour government in history. Productivity has dropped, it's stagnating. We've got a productivity gap that the Chancellor acknowledges himself but does very little to address that. Wages have stagnated. People are now 10% worse off than they were before the financial crash, and that is absolutely ludicrous. And then we've got businesses up and down the country who simply aren't getting the support they deserve. They didn't get the support they deserve with business rates, and they're not getting access to finance. I think it's £22 billion worth of a gap that the National Audit Office estimates by 2017 in terms of the cash that businesses can't get access to. What we're delivering today is a transformative vision to give businesses the tools that they need to succeed. It's about creating a fertile business environment by investing in infrastructure and skills. It's about transforming the way we look at our economy and our industrial strategy by the creation of innovative missions that deal with society's issues. And it's about looking at sectors individually and assessing the support that they need to prosper. And I'll give you a couple of examples of how businesses would have done well had Labour been in power. There was one particular manufacturer in the northwest who had exorbitant energy costs. And a few years ago, they said to me that they wanted to install solar panels on the roof of one of their factories. They've got a massive manufacturing site, and it would have made their energy costs neutral. But the way that the business rate system treated them as plant and machinery meant that it wasn't cost efficient, so they didn't do it. Second example, same manufacturer was dedicated to bringing back offshore supply chains into the UK to create jobs locally. They'd found a Polish company who wanted to come to the UK and base themselves next to the factory, which would have created hundreds of jobs. But again, because of the way that plant and machinery was treated in business rates, it wasn't cost effective. Now, if Labour's plans to exclude many forms of plant and machinery had been implemented when we'd asked government to do that, that company probably would be operating here today and hundreds of new jobs would have been created.
Fantastic, excellent. And indeed, last word on Trump, perhaps, Labour's industrial strategy is the perfect response to Trump because it is showing decarbonisation as an enabler of jobs, businesses and skills. So it is the answer to Trump. So we've got time for another round of questions. So I'll come to the front. There's a gentleman there and the gentleman there and so nobody on this side. I don't want to be shown as being a tendency towards the left, though that is the case. So, in which case we'll go for the lady over there will be the final one.
Jeremy, I'm from a Swedish newspaper, Dagens Nyheter, and I would like to ask you about European social democracy. If you see any way of promoting a more successful European social democracy in the future, even after Brexit?
What was the name of your paper?
Dagens Nyheter, it's like The Guardian in Sweden.
The Guardian in Sweden, is that what we'll call it? Okay. You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Mike Matthews, I'm one of the small businessmen, not a politician, not a member of the press, that's helped in putting some of this together. And I think I might be able to help John Pienaar in the sense of, it's a question for Rebecca. How much time have we spent looking at things like the tax credit system? How much time did that personally take you? And was there any difficulty in getting that information out of the Treasury and HMRC? And the second question was, did we make the manifesto a little red book, just so John McDonnell had something to be proud of?
Can you pass it to the lady behind you?
Hi, Maggie Smallwood from the BioVale Innovation Cluster, which is focused on growing the bioeconomy in Yorkshire. Science and innovation is a very international endeavour, and certainly for us here, the innovation ecosystem offered by the European Union has been really important, partly as a funding source, but actually much more important have been the connections between scientists and between businesses through things like the European framework programmes, the development programmes, the public-private partnerships. In order to kind of develop the outward-facing, innovative economy that you're describing, we think that, I think that continuing to engage with that ecosystem is going to be really important. And I'd like to ask Rebecca how your industrial strategy, if that includes to continue to engage with that ecosystem.
Great. Rebecca, would you like to respond?
Well, on that point, I agree completely with what you've said. I think we need to build and maintain the collaborative alliances that we've got across the EU. As part of our industrial strategy, we've said that we want to protect the current investment in Horizon 2020 and we want to remain part of that. There are other organisations that operate within the EU, for example, Euratom. In the nuclear industry, we want to remain part of that because we think it would be completely detrimental to lose contact and lose support from our friends in Europe as we exit the EU, because this is about developing a global vision and making sure that we're on a level playing field with our competitors, and we need to know what our competitors are doing and also learn best practice from them as well. On the point, Mike, that you made on the tax credit system, well, you'll know yourself that we've spent a phenomenal amount of time looking at the detail, and sometimes the detail was difficult to extract from government. Let's be honest on that point. We've done an extremely detailed body of work on our industrial strategy, from looking at the missions themselves and engaging with Mariana Mazzucato to discuss the detail. We've discussed our green offering with members of the green industry and businesses there and trade unions to make sure that we have as wide a plethora of options and policies going forward as we possibly can. And in terms of the business support, then you'll know yourself that we've engaged in a number of roundtable events over the last few years with business organisations ranging from the FSB to the CBI to the City of London Corporation to examine what business actually needs. So this hasn't just come out of thin air. This is an accumulation of all of the aspects that businesses tell us that they think is essential to a credible industrial strategy, from providing a fertile business environment in terms of investing in infrastructure and skills to give businesses the hope that we are building a vision for the future and that any investment they're made will be a profitable one, all the way through to providing support at the lower end of the scale before they reach the corporation tax level in terms of business rates and the earlier support that we can give them there. So I'm quite comfortable that we have a robust and comprehensive offering for business and industry. And as you've heard, it will be quite simply transformative.
Just to add to that, in our consultation, we had 1,000 responses, and that came from across the economy, from organisations, individuals, academics of all sizes. I know, because I had to read many of them. They were very, the interest, the determination, if you like, to help transform our economy was really obvious. Jeremy.
Fine, thank you. Welcome, our friend from Sweden. Thank you for coming. And thank you for following our election campaign. There is a political change happening all over the industrial world in that very large numbers of people are totally fed up with the political message that for the next generation you'll get less healthcare, less housing, more expensive education and fewer opportunities, and you better start thinking about insurance to cover everything. People are fed up with that. In the United States, groups of young people sit down together and have a chat like we all do, and occasionally chats get around to talking about your health. In this country, you wish each other well, you talk about the treatment you're getting, you might have concerns about our NHS funding, but you wouldn't have concerns about the principle behind the NHS. A group of young people getting together in the USA compare insurance policies. Who's covered for what? And so there is a sea change in attitudes, and that was shown in the US elections and particularly shown in the Democratic primaries and across Europe. A lot of people, young and old, are totally fed up with the agenda that the financial crisis of 2008-9 has to be paid for by slashing public services and reducing opportunities for people down the decades. Well, our whole offer to the people of Britain is something different. That instead of punishing those who did not cause or create that crisis, we invest in their future, our future, for all of us. I have very good relations with socialist parties and trade unions and environmental groups all across Europe. And straight after the referendum, I went immediately to a meeting of the Party of European Socialists to work with them for the future. Because, yes, we're leaving the European Union, we're not leaving Europe. We're going to be trading with Europe. We want tariff-free access to the European markets. We want to work with them on environmental protection. We want our universities to have that close relationship with Europe, places like York and this wonderful science park here. This is a popular movement of popular excitement that communities together can achieve things. Communities divided, impoverished, don't. That is our offer to the people of this country. On the other questions that have been raised, thank you for your work and help and support for our strategy. I'm very grateful to you for that and what we've got in this. And that whole concept of businesses working together and innovative, this science park here and the work of York University is fantastic. It's the research Research grows into development, grows into jobs, grows into creating new jobs and new industries in a sustainable way. Most universities across the country do exactly the same thing. In Rebecca's constituency, Salford University does some incredible work on environmental protection and sustainability, retrofitting older buildings, really brilliant stuff. Swansea has developed a whole series of science-based industries all around it, and you could say the same for many other universities around this country. All of them say their big problem is they get an idea, they get a good plan, and then suddenly they find it's impossible to put it into practice because banks won't lend them the money, the government won't support them, and so we lose it altogether. A National Investment Bank will not just be about infrastructure, it will also be about innovative ideas of a sustainable future for all of us. And the last point that was raised, I'm really grateful it was, about protection of ecosystems, because it's an attitude of mind that we have to have about sustainability of our environment. It is about emissions, it is about pollution, it is about climate change, but it's also about how you sustain biodiversity. When the floods happened in York, they often have happened in York, but during the crisis of 2015, Rachel and I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people about flood protection and flood defences, and it was appalling what happened. It was appalling the lack of investment in protecting this city that had caused those floods. And I really admired the work of the Environment Agency and the appalling position they were put in because of their underfunding. I'm not critical of them at all. They did everything they possibly could. It was a failure of public investment by government that was the problem. But we also talked a great deal about upriver management. So you don't just build a protective wall around a city. That, of course, you must do. But you also create the floodplains further upstream. You plant further in the uplands. You create a sustainable environment. And I am very keen that we will do everything we can, not just to protect, but to enhance our biodiversity. We will not be promoting GM crops. We will not be polluting groundwater. We will be instead a government that is utterly determined to not just sustain but improve our environment. There are proposals there to plant a very large number of trees all around the country, a lot of trees, because it helps biodiversity, it helps to improve our living conditions, and it helps the sustainability of all of our environments. So today, what we're doing here today, this wonderful science park, is thinking about our world, thinking about our concepts, investing in a high-tech future where there's a real chance for everybody to benefit from it, but also protect what is our inheritance, our very precious planet. And so it's a very sad day when the President of USA has tried to get off the bus that has taken so long for all of us to persuade all the others to get on the bus. And so I will give him that Yorkshire tea, and I will persuade him as best as I can to get back on the bus with the rest of us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I need the last words to our Shadow Business Secretary, Rebecca.
Well, again, just to thank everybody for coming along today, and to thank the venue for hosting us today, and the fantastic work that you do. We're having a discussion about it in the corridor, that centres such as this are the lifeblood of the innovation sector. They will drive us forward in our industrial strategy. They're not just limited to towns and cities. We've even got them in Scarborough and Barnsley, I understand. So they're already there waiting for the investment that they deserve to transform these communities that, quite frankly, have been left behind for far too long. So please do take the time to look into our industrial strategy in more detail. You'll see that it is transformative, and it's about building a vision for the future and transforming our economy for the long term, not the short term, so that we can become leading industrial and innovative forces within the world, and that's where we deserve to be. Thank you very much.